Greetings, friends. I find when it comes to the subject of near-death experiences, or NDEs, the fact of having a vision, of having a real experience, which no one really doubts a person had, is taken by this person or by the person's audience to mean that they have the full theological truth of what happens to us when we die. I think that's mistaken. Visions can reveal some truths. Visions can be deceptive, can be produced by demons. It is fascinating what goes on in these NDEs. I think there is some overlap of truth between them. Perusing them online on YouTube, there seem to be two general categories. There's the positive kind, which is non-Christian, and then there's the negative kind, which is Christian, loosely speaking. Now, the positive kind is New Agey, and it has to do with consciousness and bliss, and it's pure bliss, and you're unified in this oneness, and often involves depersonalization in this sense of being pure love, or I was love, and emanating love. Not that there can be love in the Christian experience of life after death as well, but it's this sort of universe, and often the people describe being in space and being in the galaxies and passing through, and this universal energy. There's no real personhood involved, whether it's God or whether it's your own person. Now, one of the overlaps between the two experiences is having something out of body, where there can be verified claims that people have extrasensory perception out of body. They can report seeing people doing things in other rooms when they're supposed to be clinically dead, things that have been verified. This is one interesting thing. There is a supernatural element. The NDE should dismiss a materialist worldview, although we have to be very cautious in drawing theological or spiritual conclusions based on what these people tell us. But I would say that there is something interesting going on with these experiences. It is worth looking at. In some of these positive New Agey NDEs, a lot of people still have weird things to say, things which should be red flags, things which should cause us some concern. For example, Lawrence, on his channel, The Enlightened Kiwi, he was talking about an experience he had when he was a young man, and his heart stopped for whatever reason, and he had a very psychedelic experience with beings talking to him and leading him into this place that he felt like he was coming to, this wonderful place that was his true home or was heaven. But then the beings that were at one point walking in front of him, they were talking to him, and they were basically like gray aliens, which are very demonic-like creatures, if anyone who's familiar with them. So even some of these supposedly positive stories have really weird elements in them a lot of the time, and for me it's just weird that they have, like the New Age worldview, this depersonalized thing, this joy in being disembodied and being free from the spirit, this Gnostic longing because they don't like matter in their worldview. But in the Christian experience, it's the other way around. You're still in your body. And I haven't gotten into the second kind. I'm about to. But in the Christian kind, there is certainly this personhood which persists after death. And in the form of hell, it's isolation and pure selfishness, which is a terror. And the two parallels between these positive and negative experiences is the blackness. Now, the New Ager, I'm speaking just loosely for utility. I'm using these terms. Obviously, not everyone fits into these categories, but the positive New Agey experience, they also experience the darkness maybe as being in space, but it's good for them. It's like, oh, it's nice to be in the universe and catching the universal vibes, whereas the darkness for the so-called Christian or negative NDE is the blackness of hell. It is literally hell. Hell is not so much about burning, not that it's a spiritual place, so we can't think of it necessarily as a physical place, but it is experienced in some degree as pitch dark, like you can't see anything. But there are all kinds of demons there, bigger and stronger than you, and other souls of humans that will torture you, just like any new person who enters a prison will be tortured and raped, literally, and the most kind of horrible emotional abuse. It's hard to imagine how can this be going on in a spiritual reality beyond our bodies. So there's limits to what I can talk about. But this is just what I've gleaned from these accounts. How much can you say this is actually a real experience? It's just a teaching through a vision that they're being given. Is it 100% the truth? Is it 75% the truth? I don't know. But the commonality is an experience of hell, an experience of pure terror in these Christian experiences, of what happens to you when you don't repent from sin. And I find this personally terrifying because I know that I sin. I have my sinful habits. Am I going to this place? And it terrifies me. But it doesn't incapacitate me. It does act as a motivator towards me. But ultimately, you just don't know what's going to happen when you die. Or maybe you can know, but many of us, we wonder. And the terror of knowing that there could be a hell, well, I believe there is. But the terror and the fear of that, now you know what they meant by the fear of God. Now you might have an idea what that could mean. And even if they say that hell is a spiritual reality and it's just the state of your own heart, it's still terrifying to think that the state of your own heart could put you in that place eternally and keep you there. That's still terrifying, even if it would be my own corruption that would be keeping me there. Let's say we don't know. Maybe it's the New Agey version and everything's rosy and good vibes. It's just pure bliss, man. Pure bliss. We're all just going back to the oneness of knowing the universe and having the universe understand itself through a new life form, which is you and your experience in this collective reality. Maybe that's true. It's just wonderful. You're going to be with all your loved ones. It'll be great. Or maybe it'll be something else. Now, of course, I was talking about hell. I wasn't talking about heaven. There is heaven. But there is this commonality of the other category of NDE, the one that I was just talking about, of it almost like uniformly introducing you to this terror, the state of the human soul. People that get caught up in hell. People get caught up in hell in this world. You can almost see hell. Maybe we've experienced it ourselves. Can you imagine how much terrible that would be beyond this world? You know, in a strange sort of way, reality is so terrifying, and in many ways, if you don't have Christ, that it could drive people to suicide. Reality can be so awful if you don't have God in your life, the Trinity, that you could commit suicide, which is a terrible thing to do. The thing is, when you come to believe in God, the Christian God, you also understand that fear of God is real. And we don't want to be in a situation where we condemn ourselves. That's so terrifying that it would actually be more terrifying than committing suicide. That'd be more terrifying. Maybe you have a terrible life and it's miserable and you don't have God in your life and you don't have Christ and you want to commit suicide, and then this would be even worse. This would be even worse. So think about that. At the end of the day, maybe take your chances with Christ. That's what I would do. And I don't know. I could still be going to hell. But I'd rather take my chances with Christ than not make any effort in that direction. So it's just interesting that we have one group of people, they're having these wonderful experiences, kind of interesting experiences. and then another group of people, it's completely different experience. So how do we really know what the truth is? Of course, I tend to believe it's the latter, is more of the truth. But at the end of the day, we're hearing accounts which aren't all that different from dreams or psychedelic drug trips or genuine visions, which can have elements of the truth to them. But when I'm hearing these near-death experiences, like they begin in a sort of way that we can relate to, like I was there in the hospital room and then I saw myself above the bed. And so it's sort of, they begin in this like sensible way that makes sense, and then at some point it almost I wouldn't say devolves, but it deconstructs into sort of like a mythological story or lesson, and that's why they're seeing like the pure terror of hell, but they're being shown something in a sequence, and then maybe an angel comes to them at the end and says something to them and then takes them out of there. So at some point, you just say, well, am I just not listening to a dream here? And that's not discounting that what this could be a true, like dreams could still be God showing you something true. So I'm not discounting that. But at the same time, there's a tendency for people to take the account of a near-death experience and then not just take it at face value, but then to extrapolate, well, this is what the theology is, therefore. And a lot of the people giving these accounts of near-death experiences, it convinced them of their own theology. So you have to be a little wary with that. A lot of these near-death experiences account, the people are so enthusiastic, they believe so much in what they're telling you. And then again, maybe they're right. It is right a lot of the time, but who are we to say? Because people can be convinced of all kinds of things through delusions, through demonic forces. And when they're having conflicting accounts, I mean, that's the thing. Here's one thing I will conclude with. Even if we grant that all of these things did happen in a near-death experience, ultimately, like whether it was the negative kind or the blissful kind, ultimately these people came back to life. So no one who has ever truly died, well, I mean, maybe some exceptions. I mean, we do believe in resurrection in Christianity, but in a more daily public sense, when someone dies, they're actually dead and then their body breaks down, that's it. So they're not coming back. So none of those people we can ever actually say what actually happens. Because maybe it's just what they experience in this NDE is something that is temporary. And if they stuck around being dead, maybe they would actually find the real picture. And who's to say whether it's actually hell, or it's the Christian version of heaven, or something else? It's this passing vision maybe. So how can you really say? If that's what it actually was, that's what you were beginning to see. You were beginning to experience this in this out-of-body experience. Well, I shouldn't call it, well, it is out-of-body. Out-of-body experience is another category, but that's risky. I believe that's very dangerous. It can literally kill you, and don't practice out-of-body experiences. Don't. That's basically like doing Ouija boards. That's like doing occult kind of stuff. But what I'm saying is that someone could get caught up in this vision. It could make them believe in it, and some of the truth could get obscured, or you could be given falsehoods. But at the end of the day, we do see that there is something interesting going on, because people are having supernatural or out of body experiences. But that doesn't help us too much, because humans have not been materialistic for most of our history. So it's nothing new to move past materialism. That doesn't help us very much as to whether we're actually interacting with evil forces or forces of God. We know that Jesus descended into Hades after he died on the cross, and he preached the gospel to the dead in Hades, and with his resurrection, he pulled up Adam and Eve from Hades, and I guess many of the other people in Hades were also saved. So there is this understanding that there is some underworld there. And in Orthodoxy, although it's not creed, it's not established doctrine, there is discussion of these toll houses which you encounter. You may have to pay some sort of toll. I don't know if it's like literal or figurative. And there are demons which come up through the air, demons of the air, that may try to bring you back down. And I think there's certainly some truth to this. And I'll go something a bit further and say something maybe a bit controversial. I believe that some of the other ancient cultures also understood some things about the afterlife. And of course, I don't believe in paganism or anything, but perhaps they got certain things right. We might see it as primitive about how the Egyptians buried their things that they thought they would need, these utensils in the afterlife. But in a spiritual sense, you might begin to see symbolically why they might do that, because sinful habits acquired or virtues acquired in this life, you wouldn't expect that to leave the human soul upon death. You would want that would either weigh you down or help you in the afterlife. But the other interesting thing is the body being actually important. In some of these ancient cultures, like the idea of wanting to reconstitute the body, there's some deep truth in that. We actually don't want to be disembodied. Life is the natural state of affairs. Death is something we inherited from Adam's sin, from the fall. Mortality itself. It's not like a personal guilt, but it's the effects of sin. It's mortality. The fact that we die, that things corrupt. Our heart is corrupted as well. The state of our heart and our nous is not cleansed sufficiently. So to enter heaven would be to enter the original state of man. It would be coming back to that state, which would be embodied. But really, it's no laughing matter. It's near-death experiences. I find that extremely terrifying. At least the certain category that I was talking about. It certainly leaves a feeling in my stomach of dread. That's not necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes you need a little dread to wake you up a little bit. But demons are real. Demons are powerful, and they cannot have any power over God. You have to turn to God. Hasta luego, amigos.